Hello, my name is Rachel Morgan, a single mother who thought moving back into my parents' house after my divorce would be a lifeline. I believed it was a chance to rebuild, but instead it became the stage where my children and I were pushed aside for their so called golden grandchild. If this kind of story resonates with you, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep telling the stories that matter. Let's begin. When I moved back into my parents' house after the divorce, I thought it was a temporary blessing. I had no idea it was the beginning of a nightmare. The words I told myself that spring in 2022 still sting whenever I recall them. My father had stood in the driveway that day, arms crossed, voice gruff but reassuring, just until you get back on your feet. At the time, it sounded like comfort. In hindsight, it was a warning disguised as kindness. I carried box after box up the narrow steps of my parents' two-story home in the suburbs. My 10-year-old twins trailed behind me, Noah balancing his sketchpad against his chest, Lily clutching her soccer ball as though she were staking her claim in a foreign land. I told them this house was family, a safe refuge. Yet even as I said it, Helen's sharp eyes followed us from the porch, measuring, judging as if every footprint we left on her perfect welcome mat was an intrusion. Gratitude burned against humiliation. I was exhausted from 12-hour shifts at the hospital, worn down from lawyers' fees, and still raw from David walking away after 12 years of marriage. This house was supposed to be my chance to rebuild, to breathe. Instead, the walls already felt heavy with old memories of favoritism and rivalry. Helen wasted no time reminding me where I stood. At dinner that night, she cooed over Daniel, her golden child, who wasn't even present. "Your brother's future is so bright. His business just keeps growing. Such stability." Then, with a glance in my direction, she added, "Unlike nursing. It pays the bills, I suppose, but it's not exactly a career that builds legacies." My cheeks burned, but I kept chewing, forcing Noah and Lily to finish their vegetables, while Helen and Charles reminisced about Daniel's college days as if his dropped-out year and their money had been erased by some invisible hand. Later, as we carried boxes into the guest room that had been grudgingly given to me, Helen walked past and made a comment so casual it almost sounded like a slip. "One day this house will belong to Daniel's family. Stability is so important, don't you agree?" She wasn't speaking to me. She didn't need to. Her message landed like a nail driven straight into the foundation of my resolve. Noah unpacked quietly, setting his pencils in a neat line, his sketchpad already open on the desk. Lily plopped her soccer ball in the corner and whispered, "It doesn't feel like home, Mom. It feels like we're visiting." I stroked her hair, promising it would get better, though a part of me knew promises had no weight here. Days passed in a rhythm of unspoken rules. Helen complimented Daniel's every achievement during phone calls, loud enough for me to overhear, while sighing whenever I asked for help with the twins' schedule. Charles nodded along, practical and detached, as though my struggles were less urgent, less real. Gratitude turned sour in my chest, replaced by a simmering anger I buried deep beneath politeness. One evening, returning late from a shift, I passed the kitchen and froze. Charles's voice carried through the half-open door. He was speaking to Daniel, who lounged in his usual self-satisfied tone. "We'll always take care of you, son," Charles said warmly. "Rachel. Somehow she'll manage on her own." The words pierced deeper than any scalpel I'd ever held. I realized in that moment I wasn't truly part of their safety net. I was the net they expected to hold itself. That night, as the house settled into silence, I tucked the twins into their shared bed. Noah curled up with his sketchpad at his side. Lily stared at the ceiling, her boldness dimmed by uncertainty. When the lights were off, her whisper broke the fragile quiet. "Mom, do you think Grandma and Grandpa even want us here?" The day Mason was born, my children vanished from my parents' sight. It was winter when Sophia gave birth, and by summer of the next year, the house that once held Noah and Lily's laughter had turned into Mason's kingdom. Every corner bore his imprint, a nursery carved from what used to be my father's study expensive baby equipment, scattered across the living room, and Helen's endless chatter about milestones as if he were the only child who had ever drawn breath. Charles's words from months earlier, "Daniel deserves more," rang in my ears as I watched it unfold. Back then it was subtle. Now it was undeniable. Helen began canceling the simplest joys we'd planned. One Saturday, Lily had been buzzing with excitement to show her grandmother the soccer match she'd trained so hard for. Cleet's tied hair pulled back, she looked ready to conquer the field. But Helen waved her off, slipping her coat on. Mason needs me today. Daniel and Sophia shouldn't be left without support. Lily's face fell. She didn't say a word, but when she jogged out to the car, her shoulders drooped lower than I'd ever seen. Noah tried his own way of being noticed. He had worked for days on a drawing, pouring his quiet creativity into every detail. He presented it shyly at the kitchen table one afternoon, sliding the paper toward Helen. She glanced at it, murmured a distracted, mm-hmm, and then pivoted toward Sophia. Do you think beige or cream curtains for the nursery? Her tone was animated, dismissing Noah's effort as though it were a crumpled receipt. I caught the moment he folded the drawing into a tight ball under the table, his knuckles white. Later, I found the torn scraps in the trash. Sophia was no gentler. Lily's clarinet practice, scheduled carefully by her music teacher, became a target. One evening, she had barely played a few notes before Sophia stormed in from the hall. Could you not do that right now? Mason needs his quiet. Lily lowered the instrument, cheeks flushed with embarrassment, tears pricking her eyes. She didn't argue. She simply walked to her room, clutching the clarinet to her chest. I followed, wrapping my arms around her trembling shoulders. Your music matters, I whispered, though I wasn't sure my words could pierce the unfairness closing in on her. It wasn't just me who noticed. Margaret, my mother's sister, came by for dinner one humid evening. She was softer in manner than Helen, with a sharp eye that missed nothing. She watched as Mason was paraded in his high chair, applauded for dropping peas onto the table while Noah's attempts at conversation were brushed aside, and Lily was hushed when she laughed too loudly. Over dessert, Margaret leaned close, her voice low but deliberate. Rachel, this isn't healthy. For you or for them? Her eyes flicked to my children, who sat stiffly, their plates barely touched. But the deepest wound came at Christmas. The tree glittered with gold and silver ornaments, each one carefully chosen by Helen. Daniel and Sophia's gifts for Mason towered under the branches wrapped in glossy paper and satin ribbons. Noah and Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, watching as Mason tore into boxes revealing designer clothes, a motorized toy car, and gadgets a baby could never use. When their turn finally came, Noah received a plain set of pencils, Lily a scarf too itchy to wear. They both thanked, politely trained to be gracious, but I saw the pain written across their faces. Later that night, when everyone else was distracted with wine and chatter, Noah whispered to me, voice trembling, "Why are we less important?" His words cut through me sharp as glass. I wanted to tell him it wasn't true that love couldn't be measured in gifts or glances, but what comfort was there when the evidence sat stacked under the tree? I smiled weakly, stroked his hair, and told him I loved him fiercely. But inside, something hardened. Their innocence was being chipped away by constant reminders that they were second best. When the plates were cleared and laughter echoed from the other room, Margaret touched my arm. Her expression was grave, her tone steady. They're using you and it's hurting the children. You need a plan. The day my children were banished to the basement, I finally saw my parents for who they truly were. Margaret's voice had echoed in my head for weeks. You need a plan. At the time, I thought she meant eventually cautiously when I had the means. I hadn't realized how soon that warning would become a living prophecy. It was late October, the wind outside rattling dry leaves across the driveway when my phone buzzed during a midnight shift. Messages lit up one after another, panicked and uneven. From Noah, Grandpa says we have to move to the basement. From Lily, this isn't fair. They took our things. I hate it here. My heart stopped, the words blurring together as I fought to keep my composure. I told my supervisor there was a family emergency. My hands trembled so violently while signing out that I could barely hold the pen. The drive home felt endless. The house loomed against the dark sky, every window glowing warmly, but all I could think of was the damp, unfinished basement I'd glimpsed a dozen times with its water stains and tang of mildew. When I rushed inside, the scene seared itself into my memory. Noah sitting on a mattress shoved against a concrete wall, coughing, his cheeks flushed from the cold dampness. Lily clutched her clarinet case, tears streaking her face as if that fragile instrument was the last piece of her identity she could protect. I stormed back upstairs, pulse hammering. Helen and Charles sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea like it was any other night. Daniel leaned back in his chair, smirking, while Sophia scrolled through her phone. The air reeked of their casual authority. "What have you done?" My voice cracked like a whip. Charles didn't flinch. "We've made adjustments. Mason needs the larger space. Your children are old enough to adapt." I stared at him, horrified. "Noah has asthma. That basement is damp and freezing. You're risking his health." Helen finally looked up, eyes cold. "You always were dramatic. This jealousy of Daniel, it's exhausting, Rachel. You've never grown out of it." The words sliced me open. Jealous. That was their excuse for years of favoritism, for every dismissal of my efforts. I looked at Sophia, waiting for even a flicker of discomfort, but she smirked, satisfied. Daniel gave a low laugh as if the verdict had already been handed down. I turned to my children. They were peeking from the stairwell, wide-eyed, waiting for me to protect them. Something inside me hardened. My voice came out steady, cutting through the heavy silence. "Pack your things. We're leaving tonight." The teacup stilled. Charles blinked as if he'd misheard. "Don't be ridiculous. No one's asking you to go." "I'm not asking," I replied evenly. "You made your choice the moment you shoved my kids into a basement like they were unwanted tenants. We deserve better." The room crackled with disbelief. Helen's lips curled. "Where will you go? You can't afford anything without us." Daniel leaned forward, smirk deepening. "Leaving with what money, Rachel? You've got nothing." For the first time, I smiled. It wasn't warm. It was razor sharp. "That's where you're wrong." Margaret, who had been silent in the corner, her hands folded neatly in her lap, shifted ever so slightly. Our eyes met. She gave the smallest nod, so small it could have been missed, but I saw it. A confirmation that I wasn't insane, that my defiance wasn't just reckless bravado. Noah and Lily rushed to their room, gathering their most precious belongings. I heard drawers slamming, footsteps thudding, their voices hushed but urgent. The sound filled me with both pride and heartbreak. They knew without question that this time I meant it. Charles's voice rose, trying to reassert control. "You've lived under this roof nearly 2 years. We've given you food, shelter, stability. And this is how you repay us, by storming out over a bedroom." "It's not about a bedroom." I said, my calmness terrifying even myself. "It's about respect. You've made it clear who matters here. It isn't us. Tonight, I choose to protect my children from ever doubting their worth again." Helen slammed her teacup down, porcelain cracking against the saucer. "If you walk out that door, don't expect to be welcomed back." I met her glare with one of my own. I stopped expecting that a long time ago. The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. Daniel broke it with a mocking laugh. "So what, you've been squirreling away pennies? Think you're going to waltz into some dream house?" I let out a soft, humorless laugh. "You'll see soon enough just how wrong you've all been about me. They think I'm trapped. They don't know I've already found the way out." Daniel's sneer from the night before still echoed in my head. "You've got nothing." He believed it. They all did. That was the mistake that would undo them. The living room smelled of stale tea and wood polish. Helen perched stiffly on the sofa, hands clasped like a judge preparing a sentence. Charles sat beside her, his jaw, tight eyes sharp with judgment. Daniel lounged in the armchair, smirk etched deep as if he'd already won. Sophia hovered, close arms folded, whispering smug reassurances into her husband's ear. Margaret sat slightly apart, her silence a shield, her eyes betraying a quiet awareness the others lacked. Noah and Lily huddled close to me, still in pajamas, their backpacks by the door. Their small faces held a mix of fear and fragile hope. I straightened my shoulders, heart pounding, but my voice came out steady. "You think last night was the breaking point for me?" "It wasn't. It was my line in the sand. And I crossed it already." Daniel chuckled, the sound low and dismissive. "What are you going to do, Rachel? Run off to some motel with what money you barely make enough to survive, let alone rent your own place?" I reached into my bag, pulled out a neatly folded stack of documents, and placed them on the coffee table between us. Their eyes followed the movement: pay stubs, bank statements, and finally signed lease papers. The silence was electric. "I've been working double shifts for nearly 2 years," I said quietly. "Every overtime hour, every missed holiday, every night I came home too tired to stand. It was all for this. For my children. For a life away from this." Charles's face reddened instantly. "You lied to us? You stayed here under false pretenses." "No," I corrected evenly. "I survived here. I swallowed your insults, endured your conditions, and let my children be treated as second class, all while saving every cent I could. I didn't lie. I protected them until we were ready." Sophia scoffed, her voice sharp. "So you signed a lease on some rundown shack that won't last. You'll be crawling back in no time." Before I could respond, Margaret leaned forward, her voice cutting through like a blade. "Funny, Sophia. Because without Rachel here these past 2 years, you wouldn't have managed half as well. Who cooked? Who cleaned? Who picked up the slack while you sat back? You might want to rethink who's dependent on whom." The room froze. Sophia's mouth opened, then shut, no witty retort coming to her rescue. Daniel tried to recover. "This is ridiculous. You're bluffing. Let me see those papers." I pushed the lease toward him. Read it. November 1st. 3-bedroom house, 10 minutes from the hospital, same school district for Noah and Lily. Utilities already in my name. He scanned the document, his smirk faltering. Helen's hands trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it by smoothing her skirt. Charles's voice shook with rage. "You would dare take our grandchildren away from their home for this?" "For your pride, this isn't pride," I replied, rising to my feet. My voice carried an authority I hadn't heard in myself for years. "This is survival. This is dignity. You cast my children into a damp basement for your golden boy's son. You chose who mattered, but what you didn't know is that I already had a way out." Noah and Lily's eyes lit up with cautious relief, as if my words breathed air back into their lungs. Margaret gave the faintest nod again, silent encouragement. Helen's composure cracked. Her voice trembled, but her words were laced with venom. "If you walk away, now don't expect to come back. Don't expect our doors to ever open to you again." I looked at her cold and resolute. I stopped expecting that years ago. Leaving my parents' house wasn't just leaving, it was reclaiming our lives. The night air was cold as we stuffed what little we owned into duffel bags and backpacks. Noah carefully tucked his sketchpad inside. Lily wrapped her clarinet in an old sweatshirt. Every zipper closed felt like a small victory, like sealing away years of humiliation. I told them to take only what mattered most. This wasn't about possessions anymore. It was about escape. The headlights from my old car lit the driveway as we pulled away. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't look back through the rearview mirror with dread. I looked forward. Noah leaned against the window, silent but calm, while Lily whispered, "Are we really free now, Mom?" My throat tightened as I answered, "Yes. Tonight we are." Claire's porch light glowed like a beacon as we pulled into her neighborhood. She was already waiting outside, robe pulled tight against the chill arms open. "Rachel," she said softly, guiding us inside. "You're safe here." The warmth of her small living room nearly undid me. She had made up the couch with blankets, and a plate of cookies sat untouched on the coffee table. Noah and Lily collapsed onto the cushions, exhaustion pulling them under within minutes. Their breaths evened their faces, finally untroubled. I stood over them, brushing hair from their foreheads, struck by the contrast: peace here, chaos still erupting in the house we had fled. And chaos it was. Later, my phone buzzed with messages I didn't answer, but Margaret's call painted the picture clearly. Daniel and Sophia were shouting at each other, Mason's cries echoing through the house. Helen, worn to the bone, tried to soothe him, while Charles barked orders no one followed. The structure they'd built around their golden child was collapsing the moment I stepped away. Then Helen called. Her voice, usually sharp, cracked with desperation. "Rachel, everything is falling apart without you. Mason won't stop crying, Daniel and Sophia won't listen. Your father is furious. Please, we need you." For a moment, I closed my eyes, listening to Noah and Lily breathe peacefully beside me. The old part of me wanted to give in, to rush back to fix everything as I always had, but that version of me was gone. "I'm not happy," I told her, voice steady, unshakable. "I'm free." I ended the call before she could respond. Silence filled the room, broken only by the ticking of Claire's clock. My friend squeezed my shoulder. "You did the right thing," she whispered. The next morning, Margaret came by carrying a bag of groceries as if it were the most natural thing in the world. She took one look at Noah and Lily sleeping soundly on the couch, and then at me. "They're unraveling back there," she said quietly. "And the worst part, they still don't see the damage they've done." Her words landed with both sorrow and vindication. For once, I didn't feel alone in my judgment. A week later, we stepped into a place that was truly ours. It was November when the key turned in the lock of our new rental, a modest 2-bedroom tucked on a quiet street not far from the hospital. The walls were bare, the carpet worn in places, but to us, it was a palace. Noah rushed ahead, pulling a folded drawing from his bag. He pinned it proudly above his bed, the same drawing Helen had brushed aside months ago. Lily opened her clarinet case, set the reed carefully, and played a few tentative notes. They echoed through the small house, bright and unchallenged. She grinned at me, unafraid, for the first time in years. I stood in the kitchen boxes, still stacked high, breathing in the unfamiliar air. It smelled of dust and fresh paint, but underneath that was something priceless: freedom. The weight that had hung over us at my parents' house had lifted, replaced by a quiet, unshakable peace. A week after moving in, Helen and Charles showed up at the door. Their knock was softer than usual, their expressions strained. I let them in, though every muscle in my body told me to keep the door shut. They looked around, taking in the mismatched furniture Claire had helped us gather, the faint smell of takeout dinners. Helen's voice wavered. "This isn't the life I wanted for you. You don't have to prove anything by doing this on your own." I folded my arms. "I'm not proving anything. I'm living. And we'll visit when we choose, not because you demand it." Charles shifted uncomfortably, eyes roaming the small space. His control slipped, and the words tumbled out before he could stop them. "This house, our house. Everything will still belong to Daniel one day." Margaret, who had come by with groceries and stood quietly by the counter, straightened. Her voice was calm but sharp. "Not if the rest of us speak up, Charles. Not if the family decides favoritism has no place in the will." The room went silent. Helen's face crumpled, her eyes glistening with something close to shame. For the first time, she seemed to realize the weight of her choices. I met her gaze, but didn't soften. "I don't want your house. I don't want your money. I won't teach my children to beg for love or to settle for scraps. We have our own lives now." Noah appeared in the doorway, charcoal smudged on his fingers, pride written across his face. Lily followed, clarinet still in hand. She lifted it and played a cheerful tune, her notes filling the house. When she finished, she looked at me, smiling. "In this house, we finally matter." I pulled her close, tears burning my eyes. They kicked us out for their golden grandchild. But they didn't know. It set us free. That night, after the awkward visit ended and Margaret hugged us tightly at the door, I tucked the twins into their own beds. The house was still half empty, our belongings few, but it felt fuller than any mansion. I lingered at their doorways, watching them breathe deeply in sleep, the rise and fall of their chests, steady and unburdened. For the first time in years, I whispered into the quiet I felt at home. What began as betrayal inside a family home ended with freedom carved out through resilience. Injustice tried to bury Rachel and her children, but courage exposed the cracks until the walls of favoritism collapsed. Justice rarely arrives quickly, yet when it does, it strikes with a force that cannot be ignored, reminding us that silence only prolongs oppression. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. If you felt the weight of this journey, share, subscribe, and comment. Your thoughts drop a 1 if you truly resonated with this story.